I'm no tech genius, but I know if I want my business to crush it, I need a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost makes it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. Within minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. Plus, Bluehost keeps me protected 24/7. No more worrying about hackers. I just relax and focus on my customers. So, whatever your hustle may be, secure your online presence in 2025 with Bluehost. Head to Bluehost.com to start now.
Beautiful Anonymous changes each week. It defies genres and expectations. For example, our most recent episode, I talked to a woman who survived a murder attempt by her own son. But just the week before that, we just talked the whole time about Star Trek. We've had other recent episodes about sexting in languages that are not your first language, or what it's like to get weight loss surgery. It's unpredictable, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives, and I am here with the creator and showrunner of Dead to Me, the new Netflix series No Good Deed, which I binged in like a week and absolutely loved around Christmas. She's won 4 Emmys for writing Ellen's talk show. She's written for the Oscars, but I personally fell in love with her way back when she was making fun of the L word. She was really, truly one of us. Stars, they are just like us.
That's very, very generous. Thank you. Yeah, you're an OG fan.
How are you? How has your week been?
Let's see. Well, what day is it?
It's actually Wednesday, believe it or not.
Great. Awesome. It's been a pretty good week. Had a great lunch with my new friend, Lisa Kudrow yesterday, just to fucking name drop so hard. Did you hear that? It like landed like with a fucking clunk.
I absolutely heard it.
But yes, we got to work together on No Good Deed. She's one of the stars, and
phenomenal. She's unbelievable in No Good Deed.
She is truly. She's just an incredible actor, and there are some stars among us who, when you see them and work with them and get to, really watch them inhabit a role, you're like, oh, that's why you're you. Her character from The Comeback, Valerie Cherish, was just, I think, number 4 on Variety's 100 top characters of the 21st century. And she was also on the list last century for Phoebe, deservedly so. She's just sparkly.
I know that like everything goes through casting directors, but when you were conceiving No Good Deed, were there any actors that you actually wrote this for?
I always like to have an actor or actress in mind when I'm writing, but I don't usually say who they are because it is, it's like sometimes you have a person in mind. And I wrote Dead to Me for an actor, who didn't end up doing it. But I'm so glad that I thought of her because it informed the character in a way that you would never actually get by watching it. But for me, as sort of woo-woo as it sounds, I really like to sort of channel as I write, and I try to almost inhabit the person I'm writing for. So it helps to have the actual person in mind, when I'm doing it. But I mean, when Lisa and Ray Romano, who plays her husband, when they first read at the table read, it was like, oh, I wrote it for them. There it is. It's right there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I
want to talk about, okay, so it's true. You first came across my desk when I was at a day job and I was killing time at work watching this video blog called We're Getting Nowhere.
Yes.
With Jill Bennett and Kathy DeBono, who were like LA lesbian actresses at the time. And it was them and Carmen Craiglow, who's a great writer. And you were filling in one day and you were so funny. And I actually used to write for Autostraddle. This is
nice.
I know that this show was on after Ellen, but eventually you got your own web series. Like this was at
Yes.
the time where this independent lesbian media, they were giving a lot of the great comedians and actresses who were out. That was the whole thing. Not a lot of people were out. And
I
so,
know, which is so crazy because it really wasn't that long ago. I think I started this just out in 2008.
yeah.
You know, I mean, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but I guess it's 2025 now, isn't it? So
Yeah, it was
you know,
quite a while ago. I mean, I've
It
lived
was a
a
while
while. I've
ago.
lived a lot of life. I mean, I think you have to.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I was obviously a much younger person there, but
Yeah.
of course I was out, and that was the whole point. You know, the show was called This Just Out, which was the show that I did on After Ellen, which I moved to YouTube. But for me, I was just trying to do what I wished I had had when I was a young gay person, which is somebody telling me, hey, life is good and it's okay, and like, let's celebrate the fact that we're gay. Like,
It was a truly just feel good show about insider gay shit that was so curated for that L Word fan base.
Yes.
You know, like Kate Moennig was your first guest, and those like there are almost 1 million views on a lot of those episodes, particularly like you've done so many episodes with her. And
Yes.
I hope that's monetized. Like, I hope you're getting cheks from all that, because the views
no,
are
you know,
very high.
I never. That's good to know. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I mean, I haven't made a new episode in a really long time. I think almost 10 years. But yeah, you know, I never wanted to monetize it, which is weird because I do like money. But I never wanted to monetize it. I never wanted to work with a platform or a producer, you know, that or a studio that had any ownership over it, because I wanted it to just be what I wanted it to be. And I am very lucky in that I've been a writer and a producer, you know, in TV for such a long time that I'm like, okay, I have that, you know, I get to make a living doing that. So when I'm doing this silly little video blog or, you know, internet show, I want to just feel totally unencumbered and have it not feel commercial and just have it be what I think it wants to be.
Now that you've had all this experience with Netflix and network television, in which there are so many people to answer to, even though you are the showrunner, you still have to answer to the network, to the streamer. Is there any part of you that is nostalgic for that time way back when, where you had just entire creative control?
Of course, yes. I mean, and I could do it again, you know, if I wanted to. I feel like such a different person, honestly, now than I was then. But of course, it was such a wonderful experience creatively and also personally. You know, I got to do what I wanted to do. I got to make any joke I wanted. I mean, some of it I don't think would be great today. There's some things that, you know, looking back are quite downright cancelable. But, you know, it was a different time, and I don't look for it. I beg of you. And I'm so sorry. Consider this my media apology tour. But it was such a great time personally because I met my wife doing that show. Kate Moennig was my first guest on that show. We're still dear friends to this day. I just wrote a part for her in No Good Deed, and she's wonderful, and it's so fun to have gotten to work with her in that capacity. And, you know, Rami Rosenduft, who was my co-host on that show, is still one of my best friends today. And we had such a good time. I met Tegan and Sarah doing that show. They're still dear friends of mine. I really tried to sort of create and foster a community doing that show. We would shoot them and record them in my kitchen in my, you know, 1-bedroom apartment. And then we would have a party afterwards, and people would just come over and we would have drinks and we would laugh. And it was a really wonderful time of my life, and a time that made me, I think, helped me heal a part of my life from my younger years where I didn't feel like I had that community. Because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and, you know, I was in high school in the early 90s and nobody was out. I couldn't really be who I was. I didn't even really 100% know who I was, but I certainly wasn't out. And I think because of that, when I look back at that time, I didn't have like a close circle of friends, because how can you have a really close, I mean, I did, I had like my theater buddies, you know, but I didn't have like those like gals, who like really knew me because I wouldn't
Totally.
let them.
Yeah.
And so then I got to create that doing this just out, and it was such a gift. And I also know that it connected with an audience because I heard from that audience, and it was so powerful to be able to connect with young women who felt like they were a part of that community too. And they were.
I mean, I have to tell you, so many of my personal friends do know you from that show. No, a friend of mine, Sarah, told, I was like, oh, like, have you watched, this was before we even scheduled this interview, when I was watching No Good Deed, I was like, oh, like, have you watched yet? She's, oh, I love Liz Feldman. And the first thing out of her mouth was like, I loved her from This Just Out. And so like I'm like, oh my, like, of course, like, and it's so great. And she's actually a couple years younger than me. So it's so great. I think it's, yeah, I mean, just know that like so many people watch that show. And it's great because the beauty of YouTube is that it is so accessible.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to find it. You don't have to like hunt around and find it. Like, it's just sitting there waiting.
Yeah. Some of them, unfortunately, not all of them are on there because, after Ellen changed ownership we know the rest. And so I unfortunately, some of them I think are like lost in the ether. I've never been a great archivist of my work, but there are certainly a lot of them available to watch, and they're so fun. I mean, and it's so real. Like, I'm obviously sort of playing a persona of myself because my whole gist, for those of you who haven't seen it, was that I would invite lesbians and women of interest and people of interest to the lesbian community, and I would hit on them. It was kind of the vibe of the show. I was single, guys, at the time. And, so part of it is like at 47 and married with a child, I don't know that look would work for me as well anymore. But I am certainly nostalgic, and I'm so appreciative of everybody who watched it. And
I'm really interested in your whole college story, how you wound up at BU through like a really circuitous route. But
yes,
my last question about This Just Out. So you just said that, yeah, a lot of it is you like thirsting over these people. Kate Moennig really she was the focal point for so many episodes. Is it true that the two of you guys like had a thing in?
No comment.
I'll take that as a yes. Great.
No comment.
I am doing.
I'll just say that we are very good friends, and it's we never had a relationship per se, but we have had a long-term friendship that I really cherish. And she's a good kisser.
There you go.
I just spilled as I talked about that, by the way.
Oh
I spilled my coffee. Everything's fine.
Okay, so wait. So this actually brings me to my final thing here. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. So when there were rumblings that they were going to reboot the L Word, was there any instinct in you that you're like, I could get a crack at this? Like, I am a showrunner now. Like, I am built for this.
No, because it's not a comedy. And though I have a genre that certainly is non-conforming, if you will, that's not my style. It's a soap. It's pretty much a straight up soap. It's drama. And I didn't really ever even, the thought didn't cross my mind.
Well, then what about during the initial run of the show when you were meeting all, Leisha and Kate, you're an up and coming lesbian in your own right. Was there any part of you then when you were like really looking for a writing job? There's no way at that point you're like, I could fucking write this show better than these. I mean,
no, because I really, it's a weird thing in the television writing business. Like, we are kind of segregated by our genres in a way, even though I'm really trying to, expand our perspectives on what genres can be. It's not, it's not something I ever thought to pursue because, I'm a comedy writer and it's just not a comedy. And I really also, there are things that I do so enjoy as a viewer and as a, just a passive participant that I don't want to get involved with. And that really felt like that too. I was so thrilled to just become friends with some of those women.
Yeah.
And, to go and walk the set and, visit them in Vancouver where they were shooting at the time, that was enough for me.
You didn't want to fly too close to the sun.
I did not want to fly too close to the daughter.
Okay. So I know you grew up in Brooklyn. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Poly Prep in Diker Heights, which seems like a joke, but I did go to high school in Diker Heights. And, I was a stand-up in high school.
Which is crazy, which is actually crazy.
I know.
Where were you, if you were a stand-up at high school, where were you coming into Manhattan and performing?
Yeah.
What clubs?
So the bulk of my shows were at Caroline's Comedy Club, and I performed with a group of kids called Comic Kids. We all had the same manager, and he would put on these stand-up shows. And then I did stand-up New York and New York Comedy Club, and I just always knew I wanted to be an entertainer. I knew that I wanted to do comedy. For my 10th birthday, I asked for an agent for my birthday from my parents. My parents were chiropractors who were like, okay, I'm not totally sure. No. So they basically said, listen, when you're old enough to take the subway by yourself into the city, about a 45-minute subway ride from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, where I grew up. And when you're old enough to do that and it's safe, you can do whatever you want in terms of your career. So as soon as I could ride the subway, I started going on auditions and, I got an agent, a manager, all that stuff. And I had a wonderful mentor named Hillary Scarl when I was about maybe like a freshman in high school. I was doing this like off Broadway show.
What show?
And it was called If Kids Ruled the World, and we wrote the show. So the kids wrote it, the kids did everything. We made the sets. It was a very cool experience. But I guess I wrote a monologue, and she was like, "You're a good writer. Like you could be a stand-up." And I was like, huh? Like it wasn't something I had thought of. I think I was 14 or 15 years old. So I sort of let it go. And then the next year I saw an ad in Backstage magazine for kids who do stand-up. And she called me and she said, do you see this ad? You should do this. And so with her encouragement, I wrote 3 minutes of material about my mom and like high school and the SATs and things like that. And I got into this show. I got this manager, and the rest is, my story, I guess. And I was, I think I had a proclivity for writing jokes pretty early on, and I ended up writing jokes for the other kids. About a month after I graduated from high school, I got my first job, and that was on a show called All That, because they were looking for a girl who could be on the show, who could also write for the show, because they had no female writers. And at the time, there were like mandates where you had to have at least one of us, DEI.
And this is the Nickelodeon show, All That.
The Nickelodeon show, All That, yes, of our youth. And it was an interesting time because I was supposed to go to college. And I had fought my way off the wait list at Vassar and gotten into Vassar, which is a very good school. And
it's where Lisa Kudrow went to school.
It's where Lisa Kudrow went to school. It's where my friend Jessie Klein went to school. And so many other, Meryl Streep, heard of her? So lots of incredible luminaries had gone there. And I in no way really deserved to go there, but I sort of muscled my way in off the wait list by showing up at the admissions office the day that I got the letter and saying, hey, I think you should let me in. I'm a real go-getter. And they were like, you're scaring us, but okay. And so I get in, and then I get this job, and it's my dream come true. All I want to do is TV. I know that. And so I withdrew from Vassar to my mother's chagrin, and I moved down to Orlando, Florida at 18, like just freshly 18. They gave me an apartment and a car and a salary, and it was quite an experience. Quite a bad experience, frankly.
Well, I want to say something. So I remember, and this was a while ago at this point.
Yeah.
You tweeted in 2018. This was at the height of the Me Too movement. And you said, I worked for Dan Schneider 25 years ago. I can confirm inappropriate behavior was happening even then. Cut to just a few months ago. Huge expose documentary comes out about Dan Schneider is responsible for so many television shows starring children, and so many scenes and episodes of these shows have explicitly sexual material. And at the time, so if you were 18, you knew you were gay at this point.
I knew that I think I knew I was queer. Let's put it that way. I knew I was something. But I was pretty sure, yes, I was pretty sure I was gay at this point, and I was not out, obviously. It was, in context, it was 1995, so 2 years before Ellen came out, right? There's no internet.
Yeah.
There's no email. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of email, but like there's just no connection really to the outside world at this point. But I'll just say that I was so young and so naive, even though I was like I thought I was the street smart kid from Brooklyn. I had never had a job, not even like at a grocery store. This was my first job. And I was, really hoisted into this universe where it was all men. And, at the top of that food chain was a man who had very questionable behavior and inappropriate behavior. And I was very sexually harassed. But I didn't understand that that's what it was at the time. I just knew it made me uncomfortable. And it was such an uncomfortable experience that I thought, well, shit, if this is working in television, maybe I don't want to do that. And so when I was let go / quit, because let's just say, wasn't going to be all that Dan Schneider wanted me to be, I think, it was very sad and confusing to me because it was like a sort of a dream had died. And so I thought, well, shit, like I'm 18 years old. I just had this like crazy experience by myself in Orlando, Florida, obviously not telling my parents what was really going on. And listen, it wasn't the reason why certain experiences with sexual harassment can be so confusing and insipid is because it's behavioral and it's emotional. It's not necessarily physical. So those nuances are very hard to understand when you're 18.
I think also you're so embarrassed to even talk about it. So you're living it alone.
Yeah, but I honestly didn't understand what was happening until two women who worked on the show who were older than I sort of pulled me aside and said, we're concerned about what he perceives to be his relationship with you.
Yeah.
And I think they understood that I was like, and so, thanks to these two women, my eyes were kind of opened in a way. I wasn't even, it's like there's that story about the Native Americans when the ships started coming in, across the Atlantic, and they were looking at these big ships, but they didn't understand what they were looking at because they'd never seen it before. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how I felt. Weird analogy, but I didn't understand what I was experiencing or looking at. So, I had a lot of guy friends in high school. I thought that's what was happening. So, it was a really rough first experience in show business. So all it made me want to do was go to college. I was like, I just want to be a normal kid. I want to just go to college and like be social and, smoke pot, whatever, And so my best friend from high school is an actor named Dan Fogler, who is an incredible actor now. And you've seen him in movies like Fantastic Beasts, and he's in A Complete Unknown, and he's wonderful. And we were, like acting buddies in high school. And he went to BU, he went to Boston University. I went to go visit him because I had like nothing to do. And I had money. So I was like, 18 years old, money, nothing to do. I was like, I want to go party with my friend up in Boston. And while I was there, he's like, listen, I'm going to go audition for the improv group. You should come with me. And I'm like, but I don't go to school here. And he was like, so he's like, they don't know that. So I went to the audition and I had a great time, and I was already a professional comedian. So I did pretty good. And they were like, well, you don't go to school here, but if you did, you could be in the group. And I was like, sold. So I walked into the admissions office at BU, applied, did an interview, sat there, filled out the whole fucking thing, and I got in. And that's how I ended up at Boston University. And that's where I have my degree from. I have a BS in TV.
That's an amazing story. And so you graduate from BU, and was your dream Saturday? It's so funny that we're just off of the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live, and I just interviewed Sherry O'Terry, and one of the greats. And there's so much to say about Saturday Night Live. Those who get on the show, the audition process, people who make it, people who don't. Not everyone is meant to be a star. at SNL. And that's very interesting to watch. You know, of course, Jim Carrey has the famous story how it crushed him.
Right.
For you, how attached were you to I'm going to get on Saturday night? Like, how confident were you that, like, I'm going to make this happen?
I mean, I don't think I was confident. I just had the dream, you know, like it's like almost like every comedian and every writer I know in Los Angeles now, you know, and I'm in my 40s, we all have this story. Like, in what capacity did we want to work on SNL? Or in what capacity did we work on SNL? And so it just was always my dream. I have been watching the show since I was born. Basically, I have an older brother and he would show me, you know, sketches and stuff on Sunday morning. And it was absolutely my dream. After college, I went to the Groundlings and I did that for 5.5 years. And that's very much like an incubation place.
Who was in your Groundlings troupe?
So I was in the Sunday Company for 1.5 years, and I was, you know, in it with Kristen Wiig, for example. She and I were in an all-female improv group that we started together.
What was it called?
It was called The Last Women on Earth. And it was so fun. And, you know, we came up together, Dax Shepard, Caitlin Olsen in the Sunday Company with me, and then a lot of you know, really incredible writers like Darlene Hunt.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephanie Courtney, who is Flo from Progressive. She's one of my dear friends from the Sunday Company. And it was an incredible group. And, you know, when I started at the Groundlings, you know, it was Will Ferrell and Sherry that were in the main company at the time. That's how long ago it was. But it was pretty cutthroat and pretty competitive and sort of starts to set you up mentally for a show like SNL. And I very much wanted to at least get my shot to, you know, to test for SNL. But I was actually cut from the Sunday Company and didn't make it into the main company. That's what gutted me. That was far more heartbreaking and really confidence shattering for me, because I thought, well, this is the only way I'll get on SNL, and they've just cut me. So God, what does that mean? I guess I'll never. That was in 2003.
Did you, at that point in 2003, was the idea of, I actually could take the side door, which is to submit a writer's packet, get on the writing staff? Were you even thinking that way?
No, I wasn't even thinking that way, because I still didn't want to be a writer, because I had had such truly a bad experience working in that writer's room on all that I wasn't. You know, I kept getting signs from the universe that I was a writer. You know, anytime I would write something, you know, not anytime, but a lot of the stuff that I wrote, you know, at the Groundlings, people would appreciate the writing specifically. You know, if I wrote a sketch for somebody else, it went pretty well, you know. And when I was cut from the Groundlings, it was, you know, truly one of the biggest heartbreaks of my life, because it was also my community. It was my friends. It was, you know, it was how I thought I was going to be living for the next, you know, many years of my life. And what I did as a reaction to that was I wrote a sort of scathing satire of the Groundlings for this underground newspaper that doesn't exist anymore, called LA Confidential. And I wrote this piece that basically compared the Groundlings to Scientology, and how it was like this kind of like an ever shrinking pyramid to the top, and, you know, a money sucking experience.
Do you still believe that?
No, I don't. I think I was angry, and I think I felt rejected. And, you know, I am still a part of the Groundlings community. I just think it was very hard at that. I was young, you know, I was like, I think I was 25 or 26 when my journey came to an end there. And it's just not what I wanted. And I felt very sort of robbed, I think, you know?
Yeah.
And, but clearly I wasn't. Everything is meant to, you know, everything sort of unfolds for some reason or another. And as a sort of reaction to being cut, I became extremely motivated to show them that they had made a mistake. And it was, I'm very much like I'll fucking show you kind of person. And so
I identify with this greatly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you know what? I think it's actually a very productive, you know, quality to have, because I didn't get crushed permanently by it. I got crushed temporarily, and then I really wanted to rise from the ashes. And so I started writing shows and doing things. And I had a show on Funny or Die. I was like very determined to show that I belonged in the comedy world. And as a result, in 2008, I ended up submitting a reel of my characters and stuff. And I did get to test for SNL. And I did get flown to New York. And it was, the culmination of like every, all of my dreams.
So
coming true.
you did audition on the home base monologue stage?
I didn't audition on the monologue stage because there was some reason why they were building something or something. We did it in a comedy club, but I signed the 7-year contract.
Yeah. Oh, you signed the 7-year contract?
Oh, I signed the 7-year contract. And I mean, this was everything I had ever wanted, to be on a plane because, Lorne Michaels was going to say, I mean, it just was like my head was exploding. And in the airport, I ran into a gal that I knew from the Groundlings, but not well, named Michaela Watkins. And we ended up flying to New York together. And it was really sweet because she was a little scared to fly. And I switched seats so that we could sit together. And I, like held her hand and we chatted and we were very congenial and it was very supportive. And, we went to the club and we did our thing. And I think I was the first to go, which was really tricky because there were a bunch of stand-ups going. And then all of a sudden it was like, now we're going to just take a pause and a bunch of like frenetic young women are going to come up and do characters and impressions. And I feel like the audience was like, huh? So I got to break the ice for everybody. And I was the first one out. And I felt really good about what I had done. I, was very rehearsed and then, everybody went up and Michaela went up and she was so comfortable and at ease. I think this was her second time going in front of Lorne. And then true story, we go out for a drink after me and Michaela and we're just like so on cloud nine. Can't believe, this was such an exciting night. And here we are. And we're having a drink sitting across from each other and her phone rings. And all I sort of see and hear is, hello? Yeah, okay. Right now? They want to meet me right now? And she's looking at me going like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know. She hangs up and sure enough, like Seth Meyers and the other producers wanted to meet her right then and there. And so she apologized to me and I said, oh my God, go get it. Please. If it's not me, let it be you. And she gets up and she goes to another bar and I sort of sit there waiting for my phone to ring, kind of knowing that it's not going to. And I sit there and I'm sipping my drink, realizing, okay, I shot my shot and it probably didn't go. And then about 5 minutes later, Michaela, Seth Meyers, and all these people from SNL come walking by. The bar they had agreed to meet at was too loud. So they come back to the bar that I'm at and they walk right past me. Oh my God. And Michaela's sort of like giving me a look like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. And she goes, and of course, she ends up getting cast that season. And, there was something in me that I didn't experience it as like the heartbreak that I felt when I got cut from the Groundlings. I felt so proud of myself that I had gotten there without them,
Yeah.
I felt so proud that 5 years later I was being considered and it was almost good enough. And the feedback that I had gotten from that audition was, that they asked me if I would be interested in writing, in submitting to be a writer. And that was also really nice. It was very validating. And I know a lot of performers start as writers, so I knew that. But the truth is I had already had a pretty decent career in LA writing for television and being able to support myself. And the thought of moving to New York and making probably about a quarter of the money that I was making in LA writing for TV, I just thought like, no, I don't think that's really what my trajectory needs to be,
At this point, were you... Oh, wait, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, the sort of moral of the story is that was 2008. What did I tell you? I started in 2008. This just out.
Oh,
so if
wow.
I had gone...
that's the same period. Wow.
If I had gone and gotten that job and done that job, I wouldn't have done this just out.
And you never would have met Rachel.
And I never would have met Rachel.
Wow. Yeah.
Or maybe we would have met, but I certainly
Yeah.
wouldn't have had the time and the space to fall in love with her.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
maybe she would have been a musical guest on SNL. Who knows?
Yeah.
You could be the Scarlett Johansson, Colin Jost of your generation.
Exactly like them. And but yeah, so it's hard to feel bad about any of it because look at the way life has unfolded,
Yeah.
and it's a really good lesson, which is like you think your life is heading towards this one destiny because that's what your ego really wants for you, but then sometimes life hands you another set of pages, and those are the ones that are really meant to be in your book.
Well, I love how you talk about how like the universe was really giving you clues that you were meant to be a writer rather than a full-on performer, because you certainly are a performer. You could get up and do stand-up anytime you want. You did this just out, which is performance.
Yes, yes.
But of course you've had the greatest success in writing for other people. The story of like sort of manifesting this relationship with Ellen is so interesting. I know that and this is a true example of when, luck is when like opportunity meets whatever the expression is.
That one. Yeah, that expression. Yeah.
When preparation meets opportunity, because you specifically hired an agent who had represented Ellen's head writer. See, this is very strategic. This is you.
Yeah.
This is showing that you have a lot of strategy, and this is the Vassar in you peeking through.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky in that my mom taught me how to visualize and manifest from a very early age, and my parents had high expectations of me, and I didn't want to disappoint them. And my mom really gave me some real spiritual guidance and taught me that like if
What
I
did she
could
do for
see
a
it-
living?
She's a chiropractor, so she's sort of in the that more holistic world. And
Wow.
And her mom, my grandmother, was also a visualizer and just very ahead of her time. And so I even as a stand-up, obviously, as in my teenage years, I worshipped Ellen, and people compared me to her because I was like this young little blonde lesbian with a funny haircut, doing stand-up, and I knew that I wanted to work for her. I had dreams at least once a week that I knew her or that we were friends or that I worked with her. I mean, this was like, a borderline healthy obsession. And when her talk show came out, I was like so excited because it was shooting in LA. I had, really no career yet to speak of. I was living, in a dinky apartment with a roommate, but I watched that fucking show every day, the first season. And what I did was I started practicing writing monologues for her just to see if I could do it. Because I thought, I know every joke this woman's ever told. Maybe I could. And so I wrote a bunch of monologues like a real nerd. And it was around that time that my parents were getting divorced. And I think I was about 25, 26. And the purpose of bringing that up is that I was cut off financially.
Oh.
And my parents were very supportive of me when I was doing the Groundlings because it felt like it was like a grad school kind of, experience. And so they were helping me with my rent and stuff still through that experience. But now I'm 25, 26. They're getting divorced. And it's like, I just realized, I got to stop. I got to take care of myself. And so I started, working in restaurants and doing the kind of things that most people do, when they move to LA. I just got to sort of delay it a couple of years, and I'm working in a restaurant, and I start getting jobs as an actor. I'm like booking parts as a little character actress on silly little shows here and there, and I had a pretty good year. It was like I had booked 6 things or something like that, and at the end of the year, I had like 10 grand. I had made $10,000 in the year, and I was working in a restaurant. And I thought, this is not sustainable. This is really, really tough. And I had like a few $100s in the bank. It was not the way I wanted to live. And so I decided, I know I can write. I can do this thing. Maybe it won't be so bad if I try. And I had this incredible manager who's still my manager to this day, Christy Smith. And I sat down with her and I said, I want to be successful. I knew what I wanted my life to look like. I wanted to be somebody, as silly as that sounds, but I knew I wasn't going to marry some man that was going to,
Right.
pay for my life or, any of these.
Also, some people are better suited for that starving artist lifestyle than others.
Absolutely. And I knew that I wasn't suited to it at all. I didn't want to suffer. I didn't want to, there was no romance in that for me. I came to LA to quote unquote make it, you know? And so I was like, I'll throw my hand into the writing, world. And I put a packet together, and as luck would have it, within a month, I was on my first show out here as a writer on blue collar TV, which is such a strange fit for me, but there I was. And it was when I was working on that show that I was like, why am I doing this when I could be writing for Ellen? And I was like, you know what you want to do, girl. So I think she was on her second season at the time. And as it always is, sort of like you have to get a job before you get an agent, which is so backwards thinking. But I didn't have an agent because I got this job on blue collar TV. Now agents were willing to sit with me. I sat with this wonderful guy at CAA, Andrew Miller, who is still my agent to this day, 21 years later. And I said, I want to work for Ellen. And there was this agent named Greg or something that had been the head writer's agent. And I was like, basically, like, does he want to be my agent? And he was willing to represent me. And I literally took out, I probably got some of those details wrong, but you get the idea. I was like, I heat-seeking missiled him.
Yeah.
And I got the packet out that I had written for Ellen years earlier, or a year earlier, and, kind of brushed it up, wrote a new one, and submitted that. And I knew that I could get it at least in the hands of her head writer, and she'd have to like it, and she'd have to, want to pass it on, but she did.
So you write for Ellen for many years, and eventually you decide to leave because you want to pursue writing something longer than a monologue, essentially. You're like, I want to write more narrative, etc. How difficult was it it's like you basically got so used to writing in somebody else's voice. Where does the line or the boundary kind of blur where you're able to find your own creative voice?
Yeah, I mean, so when I worked for Ellen, I only worked for her talk show for 2 years, and then I did other stuff with her,
Oh, right, the Oscars.
Over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Oscars a couple times, and my show that she produced. And, I think I stopped doing stand-up when I was writing for her because I couldn't do both. So I kind of gave her all my joke writing focus. But it's a different voice, I mean, she's daytime television. Ellen is a clean comedian, or she certainly was at the time. There's nothing controversial. She doesn't want to ruffle feathers. She just wants to talk about the everyday observational fun stuff that is so enjoyable and why we all loved her. So I knew her well enough and related to her enough that I could do that, but I couldn't then also kind of do anything else. So after a couple of years of that, I just was hungry to do more and to write in my own voice and to get back to stand up and to, figure out really like what I wanted to say. And she was incredibly generous with me. And I know that my story sounds different than a lot of other stories that you've heard, but I had an incredible experience working for her. She hired me not knowing anything about me, but knowing that I kind of worshiped her. I mean, I talk about manifesting. When I was 21 and first coming out to LA just for the summer, I paid $50 to like attend some talk she and Anne Heche were doing about women in entertainment. And she was in a very different place in her life. This is 1998. Her show had just been canceled. And she was like depressed. Like she was in a really rough place. Like nobody would hire her. And I sat there in the front row because I got there like an hour early because that's how much of a nerd and how much of a fan I was. And I got to meet her afterwards. And I shook her hand and I said, "You're Carol Burnett and I'm Vicki Lawrence, but you don't know that yet." And she said, "What? What are you talking about?" She's like, wait, well, you think I'm going to get another show and like put you on it? And I said, yeah, sounds good. See you then. And that was our conversation in 1998. So cut to 2005. I'm sitting in her office because I'm being interviewed, to be a writer on her show. And she's like, it's nice to meet you. And I said, well, we've met. And I thought, oh shit, why am I bringing this up? This like paints me in such a creepy light. Regardless, I remind her of the story and she says, I remember you.
Uh-huh.
And she hired me anyway, which is kind of amazing. And I knew it. I knew that I was like sort of destined to work with her. And we were real simpatico. And, she is tough and exacting and a perfectionist. And I thank her for that because she instilled such a work ethic in me, such a drive. I already kind of suffer from the never satisfieds, and she does too. And I relate to that. I'm always interested in being better. And so is she.
I want to talk about Michael Patrick King.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned
another mentor.
Yes. You talked about, Valerie Cherish. He created The Comeback and, of course, longtime showrunner for Sex and the City. And you worked under him at Two Broke Girls.
Yes.
First of all, did you ever see him do stand-up?
No, I didn't. But I actually met him at the Groundlings because we did an improv show together. So I met him kind of more on equal playing field. Like we were just both like these wacky guests doing this show at the Groundlings, and we made each other laugh so much. And I absolutely idolized him because Sex and the City was one of my favorite shows. And I remember watching that show as a young person in my 20s, early 20s, thinking like, this is well written. This is incredible. And so I 100% knew who he was, got to meet him doing improv, and which is how I met so many important people in my life. He gave me a shot, and I worked on 4 of the 6 seasons of the show.
What was the best advice he ever gave you?
Almost more than advice, he gave me confidence. He's, also so hardworking and exacting, and can be a tough person to work for because he wants the best. And I remember being in front of the 4 monitors because it was a multicam, so there's 4 monitors going at once, and we're looking at the different camera angles and what's happening and who's where, and we're always punching up jokes as we go, which is something that we did on Ellen as well. And I looked at one of the monitors and I thought, well, we could do better than that. Like da 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 da. And I almost like didn't realize, almost like forgot who I was talking to. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, you think you can do this better than me, don't you? And I said, maybe. And he said, you're a showrunner. Like right then and there, he's like, you're a showrunner. And he said, there's a lot of really good writers, people who can write jokes. There are people who can write story. There are people who can run a room. And he said, you can do all of those things. And you're a showrunner. Saying that to me.
Very quickly, can you describe all of the different roles that the showrunner is responsible for?
I don't know if we have time. It's like 11 jobs in one. But the showrunner is the person oftentimes who creates the show. Not always. But, for me, I create the show. I hire the writers for the writer's room. You hire everyone. So you're the CEO of the show, basically. You're not just then writing the show and leading the writer's room as the head writer, but you're also essentially the head producer. You're making all of the creative choices. You're hiring all of the department heads, the costume designer, the production designer, line producer. You're leading the vision of the show, but you're also the head manager of everyone. So you're the boss, you're then also working for either a studio or a network or a platform. In my case, currently, like I work for Netflix. They're my boss. Yep. They determine how much money I get to spend and, who I get to spend it on. Generally, you're the person who casts the show as well. So, it's really like you are kind of the mastermind of the show. And it is an incredibly difficult job and painful. It's really, really stressful. It's, there's most of these shows are millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it's all like resting on your shoulders.
I often use this example of how, you can put the most brilliant minds in a room, but at the end of the day, whatever Michael Patrick King says goes.
Yes.
And, I use that a lot when talking about And Just Like That. And in your case with Dead to Me, was there anything where you came in with one idea and you were actually convinced? Like, how much leeway, like, how open are you to the other writer's input where, like, you may have an idea of how you want a season arc to go. Are you malleable? And, like, if you have, like, specific examples, maybe. From,
yeah.
like,
I mean, I think because I've worked for so many other showrunners at this point, I have been able to sort of observe their process and see what happens when they do become really stuck on an idea that maybe at the time I thought wasn't the best, And so it's really hard sometimes to let go of what you saw for your own show. But perfect example, season 1 of Dead to Me, I had pitched the entire first season as I saw it to Netflix, when they bought the show. And then I hire a bunch of writers. We get into a room, and one of them says, "Well, I think at the end of season 1, I think Jen has to kill Steve." And at first, I was like, "No." But then, what happens in a writer's room is that there's an energy that percolates when a good idea comes out, and you can feel, if there's 6 other writers in the room, you can feel that everybody's like kind of buzzing with the affirmation of like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And I might be stubborn because I'm fixated on a certain path. But if I really feel that from other people, I try to look at that point of view and I consider it. And sometimes I say no first because it's my knee jerk. But I almost always come around when somebody has a really strong idea that I know is better than me. And sort of since that experience, I've adopted the sort of ethos or, the saying, if you will, that I don't need to be right for it to be good.
Love that.
It's great if it was my idea. That's fun, but I've conceived the show, then I've hired writers to make it better, to make it better than I could do alone. So I really try to get out of my own way and listen when there's a good idea. I'm really glad I did because I think that was a great way to end the first season, and it launched us into a really fun second season.
I love how like both Dead to Me and No Good Deed came from your, some personal experience. I know for sure No Good Deed did your experience looking for a house in the pandemic, which I want to get to. But with Dead to Me, you had told the story how on your 40th birthday, you had learned that your cousin very unexpectedly died.
Yeah.
A young guy.
Yeah.
How did the idea come to you for Dead to Me?
So I was going through a very difficult period. I had turned 40. I was trying to have a baby for like the 5th year in a row. I was on hormones. My cousin passed away unexpectedly. And then the day I had this huge 40th birthday party that was so fun, woke up the next morning to the news about my cousin, and my best friend was in town to celebrate my birthday. And that day she told me she was pregnant, and I had been trying to get pregnant for 5 years. This was her second baby, and I was happy for her and I congratulated her, and and then I went to the bathroom and cried because it just was triggering, and then I went to flew to New York for my cousin's funeral, and weirdly found out this like really weird stuff about my family. People who I thought had passed one way, who had passed another way, and just like, kind of dark stuff. Then the next day I'm in New York. I go to lunch with my other best friend. She tells me she's pregnant. And the next day I found out I wasn't. And so I just was in a dark place, because I'm not the kind of person who wants to feel anything but happy for the people that I love. But I was finding myself feeling bitter and sad and in grief over not just the loss of the family member, but the loss of maybe this dream I had about having my own, biological child. Pretty heavy stuff. And I was sent on a meeting with 2 actresses who wanted to do a show together. They were just like, had some ideas. I was told, you don't have to have anything, just go meet them. I met them. I was the last person they were meeting that day.
Can we say who the actresses were?
No, I'm not going to say.
I'm just curious.
No.
Okay.
No, just for their own privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were lovely, but they were like tired. It was the end of the day and they said, "Oh, we're sick of our ideas. Do you have any?" And I like really didn't, not like pretending like I had nothing. I had nothing. So I was vamping and talking to them and, digging into their stories and trying to fucking figure something out. And something about their dynamic inspired the thought. And I blurted it out like, okay, you're a widow and you go to a grief group and you meet her and she's there. Only her guy didn't die. He just broke up with her. And they were like, huh. And I was like, and then they become friends. And then she finds out she was lying. And I don't know. It's like something like that. And one of them, I just remember, like, looked at me and said, "I like you." I thought, okay, I might be onto something here. So I developed this idea for these actresses over many months, had the entire pilot story, the first season, episodes, all the stuff. And they decided that they didn't want to do it.
Wow.
And so they passed on it, which sort of freed up the idea for me to take to the open market, which I did. And it was, a lot of places were interested, which was awesome. And I went with Netflix, and that's how I came up with the idea.
Amazing. And obviously, 3 amazing seasons of that show. And most recently with No Good Deed, I was watching a great interview actually that Abby Jacobson did. And
Nice.
It was so deep. Like, I loved her series for Amazon, A League of Their Own.
Yes.
I thought it was a kind of a crime that was canceled prematurely
Yes.
canceled. And so she gave some like really unfiltered thoughts on the cancellation of that. And in that same interview, she talked about how her character in No Good Deed is kind of loosely based on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so obviously that her whole storyline is like the infertility struggle. If you can talk about the house buying aspect, like how insane did it, because real estate makes me insane as well. I'm curious, like, to what lengths did real estate and finding a home, how insane did it make you? To what extent?
It made me pretty, it was a real moral bender is what I'm going to say. And it was a morality bender because I'm very competitive and, I'm very determined. So if I see something that I want, or if there's a job or a show or a thing I want to manifest, as we were talking about, I'm like a dog with a bone. And it's at the time, we're in the middle of the pandemic is when we were looking, and everybody was looking in Los Angeles because people realized, oh, my house is not just the place where I sleep at night. It's where I work. It's where my children play. It's the only fucking place I'm safe. So the stakes were already so high around our homes. And my wife and I were both living and working from a very small, adorable, but tiny little bungalow, which was our first house. And I didn't have an office, and I'm like trying to run a writer's room from like my tiny, kitchen. It was just like not really tenable. So when we found the house that we wanted, it was like, I just was like, I need to fucking get this house. So I might have written a letter, that had some embellishments, about things that I wanted to do. And, we got pretty nuts. And Rachel, my wife, I like to describe her as entirely too decent. Like, she's such a good person that you're almost like, come on, like, say something mean. You know what I mean? And she's just a real lovely person. And even through this process, I was surprised at some of her reactions to things. And, as we were then going and selling our little bungalow, and, suddenly something came up and she's like, you don't need to put that on the... And I was like, oh, we do. And it just was like kind of amazing what it turned us into. And I'm always really interested in things that bring out the sort of worst in us.
Yeah.
And so I just realized there's something here, in terms of a launching point for a show, because it's a very heightened, high stake situation that is bringing out some ugly. And it was, I'm so thrilled. It was a hit. People watched it. People are watching it still. Mm-hmm. It's not even been on that long, and I'm thrilled. And it was beyond a pleasure to work with all of those incredible actors. If you haven't seen the show, it's Lisa Kudrow, Ray Romano,
Matt Rogers,
Linda Cardellini, Luke Wilson, Dennis Leary, Abby Jacobson, Poppy Liu, Tiana Paris, O.T. Fagbenley. I mean, it's ridiculous.
This has been the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess. These were great questions and very, you did your homework. You know me better than I know myself.
Anything I didn't ask you that you want to say to the listeners? I have a lot of creatives who listen, like a book you want to recommend, just like.
Okay, well, I'll say this in the middle of March, I'm actually launching a new podcast with my friend Jessie Klein, who's a brilliant writer and comedian. It's called Here to Make Friends. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts. And it's really about how challenging and exciting it is to make friends in your midlife. Jessie and I became friends in our 40s in the writer's room at Dead to Me, actually. Mm-hmm. And so we're having incredible guests on the show who are either people that we are friendly with but want to become better friends with, or people we don't know. And so I'm almost sort of calling back that vibe of This Just Out, where I would invite, women on that I then hit on. I'm inviting people on I just want to be friends with.
You're looking to open your marriage, basically.
I'm looking to open my friendship Rolodex. My marriage is just fine as it is. I love you, Rach. But yeah, so give it a listen. It'll be on, I think March 14th is when we launch.
That's so great. I had no clue that you were doing that. I love that.
Yeah,
I've read Jessie Klein's book.
She has 2 and they're incredible. If you don't know Jessie Klein, she's so fucking funny. She does a lot of wait, don't tell me. And she voices the character of Jessie on Big Mouth, and she's absolutely brilliant. And we just have the best time talking to each other. So it's fun. It's kind of just like hanging out with a couple of funny ladies for an hour or so. And so I hope you'll join us.
Awesome. Everyone follow Liz on Instagram. It's just the Liz Feldman, and I'll tag you and everything in any clips I pull. This has been so great. Thank you. Everyone, please follow me, JessXNYC, on Instagram. Go over to the YouTube channel, Hot Takes and Deep Dives. Throw in my name. All of these interviews are available on YouTube to watch, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, Jess. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With the Capital One Venture X card, you earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy. Plus, you get premium benefits at a collection of luxury hotels when you book on Capital One Travel. And with Venture X, you get access to over 1,000 airport lounges worldwide. Open up a world of travel possibilities with the Capital One Venture X card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.